They gave my sister a luxury car. And me? $2. Here's what I did. Please like and subscribe Sweet Long Revenge YouTube channel. The autumnal chill that so often soothes my soul seemed instead to be a wet, icy cloak hanging on my skin. It was early October, and one of those days when the reds and golds of oak leaves that flank our street on Farm Meadow Drive were practically aflame, a sight that would normally fill me with silent delight. But today, the bright colors were almost taunting me. They only served as a reminder of the gray ache that had taken root at my core. I was on the porch of our small, all-too-familiar house at 851 Farm Meadow Drive, a place that had always been my sanctuary, watching my sister Emily drive away. The car. That was the heart of my recent unhappiness. A shiny black Mercedes-Benz, glistening in the thin Tennessee sun. It was a birthday gift. More than a birthday gift, the B-Day gift. The one her wealthy, adoring in-laws, the Thornwoods, had given her. Emily, at 28, had married into an easy life of privilege, a far cry from the simple work ethic we'd grown up with. And me? Rick's wife is Sarah, 30 years old, and the owner of Rick, who earned a decent wage, but was by no means wealthy. $2. $2. Passed to me by my own mother, with a pitying look in her eyes, as if she too knew the pathetic amount was an insult. "This is all we could do, sweetheart," she had whispered as she shoved them into my hand. "We wanted to get you something, but, you know." I knew all too well. Rick and I were socking away for a down payment on a small house, our own bit of proof that our future wasn't perennially beyond reach. Every penny was spoken for, every indulgence a discreet negotiation with our budget. Beside, there was Emily's world of champagne brunches and designer handbags, and now, a German-engineered indication of her husband's wealth. The stream that had become a widening chasm between us over the years. It was never just about money, though that was the most visible. It was about decisions, paths forked in the road, the unstated acknowledgement that we were no longer playing by the same rules. It was always Emily, the golden child, her way with social circles and attention-getting manner, making people sit up and notice her the moment she arrived. I was the dependable one, the responsible one, who quietly enabled, who bore the brunt of it all as she soaked up her good press. Rick, bless his heart, tried. He'd held my hand that morning, his thumb blanketing my knuckles. "It's all right, Sarah," he'd said in that soothing voice of his. "It's just money. It doesn't define us." He knew these stung me, how much I couldn't help but feel the sting of comparison, even though I tried to hide it. He was my rock, my constant in a world that could feel tilted against me. But even Rick could not blot the memory of Emily's high-pitched screech as the car keys rested in her palm. Her face was alight with unblemished happiness, a joy so full and unencumbered that it stabbed in contrast to the hollowness welling in my gut. It wasn't envy, not entirely. It was a deep sense of unfairness, that he had been passed over, shortchanged, almost forgotten. The $2 seemed like a taunt, symbolic of my status in the pecking order. A reminder that while Emily received something tangible symbolizing her charmed life, I was just about as good as holding nothing. A gesture so small, it was almost offensive. The Mercedes had been a lurking apparition all morning. Whenever we passed an upscale car dealership, whenever a sleek vehicle purred past us on the freeway, my thoughts would push out Emily's name, her smug smile. It was irrational, I knew. I should be happy for her. But the bitterness had settled in, a mute weed choking off any excuse for goodwill. We sat that night on the threadbare sofa, and the simple reassurance of his nearness provided scant balm for my jangled spirit. We should have been planning our future, talking about houses with a picket fence. Instead, my thoughts were a maelstrom of comparisons and resentments. "Are you okay?" Rick asked, then his hand found mine. I sighed, the sound laden with a million unstated emotions. "I don't know, man. I just don't know what to think about it all, Rick. Why is it like this? Why is it that some get everything so easily and others have to fight for every crumb?" He squeezed my hand. "It's not about easy, Sarah. Emily tries too. The Thornwoods have worked hard for their success, and it shows. It's not a reflection on us." "But a car, Rick. A brand new Mercedes. And I get $2. My voice cracked. "It's kind of because it feels like they're saying, 'Here, Sarah, this is what we think you're worth to us.' And the answer is nothing." Rick drew me in close, his warm smell that of a familiar comfort. "That's not true. They value you. You know they do." Did they? Or were they merely indulgent of me, the less glamorous sister, the square peg just visiting their gilded world? The truth, I suspected, was something closer to the latter. Emily was the star, and I was a bit player who could be cast aside when someone more interesting came along. The next few months were a haze of simmering resentment. I couldn't help obsessively looking at Emily's social media, which, geezer Pates, just added fuel to my own misery. There she was, standing in front of her new car, and under the caption was a long line filled of effusive thanks to her in-laws. Images of her behind the wheel, hair flying in the breeze, a carefree and brilliant smile. Each post was a small piece of glass grinding into my heart. I tried to distract myself. I threw myself into my job at the local library, happy to escape from this world and the whispers of the stacks. I would spend hours looking over the antique maps, lovingly tracing the lines of long-forgotten journeys around a past that was clearly less busy. Rick and I kept house hunting, but the pleasure had been sucked out of it. Each sweet bungalow was compared with disdain to the luxurious cars Emily now whipped around town. One Saturday, Emily called, and as usual, her voice was bright and bubbly. "Sarah, darling, I was just saying we should have a sister's spa day. My treat, of course. I have us a reservation at that new place downtown. We can chill, massage up, all that." My first instinct was to say no, to fall back on my self-enforced crankiness. "Great," Rick said, listening in on the conversation and nudging me. "Go, Sarah," he whispered. "It's a chance to reconnect. And it's free." So I went. The spa was very over the top, all low whispers and costly oils. Emily had zoomed in on the driveway, of course, and parked it with a flourish in the valet section. She shines, her skin is radiant, and even the resort she was sporting, in plastic, has major car model swag. We lay side by side on massage tables as masseuses pummeled our muscles. Emily chit-chatted about her life. She told her about a visit she'd just made to Aspen, the charity gala she'd attended, her new handbag collection. I listened and nodded, making polite interjections, even as my mind was spinning. The difference between her life and mine was more than a metaphor. It was an actual weight. "Oh, and this car," she said, her voice somewhat muffled as she lay face down. "It's just divine. The handling, the comfort you need to drive it sometimes, Sarah, just to see what you're missing." The words, presumably offered with innocent enthusiasm, hit like a punch. See what I'm missing? That was exactly the problem, wasn't it? I was missing so much. And it wasn't just a question of material goods. It was about a life lived on some other plane, a life where such grand gestures were everyday stuff. Instead of experiencing the spa day as a bonding form of togetherness, I found it alienating. As Emily drove away in her sparkling Mercedes, with just a whiff of lavender lingering and a gnawing feeling deep in my gut, I realized something needed to change. The $2 that was once a reflection of what I reasonably deserved started to shift for me. It was not only a paltry sum, it was a good faith beginning. A challenge. I thought, if this is what you got here, then what can I make of it? I started small. I started walking to my office, taking advantage of both the fresh air and the quiet rhythm of my own footsteps. I began brewing my coffee at home rather than buying it from the neighborhood coffee shop. I started reading up on inexpensive meal planning, taught myself how to cook with seasonal ingredients from the farmer's market. Every little act of frugality seemed a mini rebellion against that inadequacy. I also began to re-examine my relationship with Emily. The constant comparison was exhausting, a joy poacher. I made a conscious decision to protect myself from her world, from her socials. I still loved my sister, but I needed to move out from under her shadow and blaze my own trail. Rick is my rock during all this. He cheered my little victories, the fact that I'd learned to budget my tenacity. He reminded me that the true value of wealth wasn't car keys and designer labels, but love, connection, and purpose. One evening, I found a dusty old box in the attic. When I got inside, there was my grandmother's recipe book, yellowed and brittle pages intact. My grandmother, who bore hardship with quiet dignity and unyielding strength, was an amazing cook. Her recipes were all about simple, nourishing ingredients spun into family meals that had fed our people for generations. A thought took shape, a delicate seedling of hope. I thought of how her kitchen had always smelled like cinnamon and baking bread. It was the smell of warmth, of home. I recalled the look of pleasure on people's faces when they ate her food. I started baking. First just for Rick, then for friends. The apple pie my grandmother was baking filled our little home with a smell that drove out the lingering shadows of the Mercedes. My baking was to die for. People marveled, so comforting and nostalgic. One day, I went up to the owner of a small, independent coffee shop downtown. I took them a sample of my grandmother's known pecan pie. They loved it. They placed a small order, and then another, and another. Slowly, painfully, Sarah's pies came together. I poured my heart and soul into every crust, every filling. I brought the knowledge I had learned from my grandmother, a bit of that meticulous planning driven by my own lack of money, and Rick with me. It wasn't easy. There were late nights, early mornings second-guessing. There have been times when I've taken a long look at Emily's carefree life and felt stung by what might have been. But those pangs were growing less frequent, less fierce. Steadfast belief in one's own worth. Emily called later that week. She had intended to go on a weekend break at the coast, an impromptu trip in her Mercedes. I heard, as I always had, but this time there was no bile in my heart, no jealousy. It wasn't some big dramatic thing, just a peaceful agreement, an undramatic acknowledgement of our differing paths. That's beautiful, Em. I replied evenly. Rick and I are considering buying a house. A fixer-upper, but it has potential. We're so excited. Silence on the other side. Oh, that's nice, Sarah. The zeal in her voice was forced, a bit strained. I've also started a small baking business. I went on, my voice growing stronger. My grandmother's recipes. It's sort of starting to catch on now. Another pause. That's interesting. I didn't need her validation. I didn't need her approval. I had found my own. Emily and I would probably always have an aching gap, the mark of our separate existences. But I didn't view it as a tragedy anymore. It was simply a fact. I had received $2, the emblem of what was wanting. But I had taken those $2 and the power they chanced to unleash to create something that was real, that matter. And that, I realized, was worth far more than any luxury car. It was worth everything. Staring at the old house, I knew that this was where life, becoming and being new yet again on a quiet footing of resilience, would really start.